So thank you for joining the session today on renewable energy and choosing this session. Um, and we are happy that you um, came back. I see most of us, the energy levels were going down, so that's why we had to get some sugar out there and come back in rejuvenated. So I will start with Andrew Amadi, who is the CEO of Korea, to just give us a quick overview on the topic of the day and what Korea has been doing in terms of trying to increase access to energy and more specifically renewable energy. But before we get there, I will ask us to do a quick round of introduction just to speak a little bit 1 minute. Let's give us 60 seconds about your company. Let's start from Andrew.
Thank you, Ebenezer. Good afternoon, everybody. This is what they call the graveyard hour. And, people do the buffalo movement where the heads drop, so I'm watching you to see if you're awake. So my company, Tombolo Energy, in Africa, how many people do you, what's the population of Africa? Anyone know? Audience participation. What's the population of continental Africa? Anyone know? 1.2 billion. How many of those people have access to electricity? 50%, correct. So 680 million people in Africa don't have access to energy. And so I'm an African, I'm from Africa, my family's from Botswana, I'm third generation African, and I work with some Europeans. And the European solution or the mindset for Africa is that solar is the answer. But solar is not the answer. It's far from the answer, nor is wind. And the problem, so I work in very rural communities, and the problem that we face in Africa, you'll see almost on every street. I've just come from Zambia. And in rural communities, people need heat. They don't need LED lights. 73% of energy demand in Africa is for heat, not light, to prepare water and to cook. And so on a massive scale in Kenya, South Africa, Malawi, Zambia, people cut down trees and they make charcoal or they burn paraffin. It's a disaster because if that goes, there's going to be no circular and no economy. So we've developed a technology that allows communities to make their own waste, process it, and cook with organic biomass from any source, and at the same time provide them with the basic requirements of energy and fast internet access. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Let's move to Juliana.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juliana Kainga, and I am the Vice Chairperson of the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya. And we are basically a business member organization that seeks to promote the sustainable development of electricity in Kenya. We have around 40 members, with Jibril being one of them, luckily. We were founded in 2019 out of sort of what I'd call a crisis in the sector. Zero movement, a lot of projects in the pipeline, growing population, just a lot of need for us to get things right in the sector, and we funded that 3 years ago. We have representation of around 700 megawatts that's already on the grid from our membership. And we are covering the entire value chain. So anyone who's in generation, transmission and distribution, off-grid and commercial industrial players are actually part of our membership for as long as you're within private sector. And the very, sorry, we also do have representation in a working group that we call the electricity markets, which we're actually launching this year in a month or so. Basically, this working group looks at demand as a core component of the electricity value chain. So we've always focused on generation and transmission infrastructure, but I think where we are at as Kenya, we've already gotten that right, at least on the generation side. There are some challenges. There's work that needs to be done on transmission and distribution, but where is all this renewable energy potential going to go? So we want to start looking at demand, aspects of e-mobility, green hydrogen. How do we start pulling investors to come invest in the country? So looking forward to actually engaging with you and also learning from you and providing insights on the sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Jibril, tell us more about Ofgem.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jibril Mohammed. I'm the CEO at Ofgem. We're a power company, essentially a solar power company. We sell electricity, and we are a member of ESAC. And Andrew is also a chair on the side of the Association of Renewable Energy. So we sell electricity essentially, but mostly our focus is on the commercial industrial space. Where did we get our dream or the idea to do this? Essentially, he said, currently we have 2 billion, a billion people in Africa, and by 2050 there will be over 2.5 billion. So 1 in every person on the planet will be an African and will require an energy to support the economy, the social side of things, and also to mitigate the green, yes, and Ofgem is part of this. We are taking the initiative in greening and powering the commercial industrial space.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jibril. My namesake, Andrew Amadi.
Thank you so much. I have the privilege of having 2 people sharing my name on the stand. So if you combine Andrew and Amadi, my name is Andrew Amadi. I'm the CEO of the Kenya Renewable Energy Association, which is an umbrella body that promotes all types of renewable energy in Kenya, East Africa, Africa, and the world as a whole. KEREA is 20 years old this year, founded in 2002 from the technical committee at the Kenya Bureau of Standards that was developing solar PV standards. KEREA has been involved in the background and in the foreground in promoting access to electricity, access to solar, and since 2020, when the strategic plan was done and after the passing of the Energy Act 2019, decided to be more intentional and focused on the future of renewable energy in Kenya. Kenya is already a leader in renewable energy, and it is not the time to sit on our laurels. It is time to shift gears. So we are shifting gears, looking at 3 main areas. 1 is the productive use of renewable energy for food security. 2 is the transition to electric mobility. And 3 is access to clean cooking technologies. So that is enough material to keep us busy. And I think as we go into the discussion, we'll now see how exactly we can be able to achieve this.
Thank you, Andrew. Tell us a bit about Giraffe.
Fantastic. I prepared my story in pictures, so I hope...
We're going to do that in a bit.
Okay, so what am I talking about?
We just want to know your name,
okay,
the organization.
Alrighty.
Then we'll be moving to the
okay.
session.
Fantastic. I can do that. I'm just very eager for this meeting. Linda Davis, Giraffe Bioenergy. We are developers of rural bioeconomies producing food and ethanol cooking fuel. I'm really pleased that you are here. We've seen your emails. And essentially the problem we're solving is that of the lack of clean, safe, affordable, and accessible cooking fuel. Some statistics: over 80% of Kenyan households use charcoal and firewood, and that has detrimental effects. I look forward to showing you my pictures.
Awesome. We'll be looking at, can't wait to see them. I see the energy in the room when you're talking about renewable energy. Now we'll begin with Andrew Amadi. I think we just wanted to share a little bit more uh, about a career and what you're doing. So because we're looking at renewable energy being a source of clean energy, at the same time also contributing in addressing climate change issues. So tell us more about what Career is doing.
Yeah, thank you. So Career promotes.
You can decide to use the podium, or
Yeah.
you can decide to sit as well.
Okay, I think I'm comfortable here, or maybe lazy or old, I don't know. So Career works to promote the uptake of renewable energy technologies and solutions by supporting the creation of an enabling environment. So the enabling environment has got different components: policy, institutional, regulatory is a major one because it affects or disincentivizes the growth. There is access to finance, which is on two sides. There are developers and there are consumers. So we look at how to address those issues. There's access to markets because for renewable energy to grow, we need to create new markets, we need to create bigger markets. And then there is also access to technologies. We need to have the right technology for the right application. So the way that we do this is that the totality of renewable energy is very wide. It covers everything from solar to waste to hydrogen to very many moving parts that is not possible to do it in one entity. So we work in collaboration. We work with subject matter experts on clean cooking, on electricity, commercial and industrial. With the private sector, we work through KEPSA. We work with anybody and any entity that is aligned with these goals and purposes. So today, renewable energy for the longest time has been promoted in the context of climate mitigation. But for Africa, we are now saying renewable energy is not about mitigation. Africa is not responsible for majority or even a sizable portion of carbon emissions. It is for adaptation. That Africa is a massive landmass. We cannot be able, as you've just been explaining, to deliver the kind of technologies that maybe have worked or the way that they have worked in other places. We need to be able to zoom in and find a solution that will work at a village level and replicate this 300 million times over. It's not business as usual, so we need to have models that work, and that's what we are committed to. We engage with the government, we engage with development partners, we engage with the private sector to be able to find and allow for these solutions to happen.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And it's quite interesting that you seated at the middle, and the two people at the far end making up your name. That's Andrew Amadi. And I mean, you talked about the policy space and creating an enabling environment for businesses to operate. And I just want to bring in Jibril from Ofgen, picking up the discussion from there. I mean, you're now a private entity. You spoke about the enabling environment. As a company, what are the solutions that you have that are now driving renewable energy and also looking at issues on climate change? So speak to us more about Ofgen.
Yeah. So thank you, Amadi. Unlike Andrew, probably I would like to stand. I've been sitting the whole day. So, I mean, I would ask, what is the future of power? What is the future of energy? Let's look at 2030, 2050. There are three key things. They're called the triple D, which is decentralization, decarbonization, and digitization. So if you want to know the future, it is based on those three elements. So decarbonization, meaning that we will be moving away from fossil fuel, diesel gensets, and so forth, towards renewable energy. Power will be decentralized. meaning instead of having power pulled all the way from Ethiopia or Bujagali in Uganda, most cities will be having their own power generated, or similar to what Ofgem is doing now is majority of power by the commercial industrial service that we provide is power that is generated on site, meaning clients and factories would have power on their roof or on the ground, and they'll consume as they demand. And then digitization. What does digitization mean? It means, in a layman's language, for those of you who receive your utility bill, you pay them based on trust. So you look at the electricity bill and say, okay, this month, this is my bill. I'll pay it. But against what? I mean, how do you decide that this is the correct bill? Who decides? The person billing, and you are the one. So in the future, you'd be able to have a bill that you yourself are able to look and say, okay, let me counter check with my digital meters and see. So why am I having so much of power in the house? And why is it that we're generating so much power requirement from one bedroom? Maybe the young man somewhere is generating bitcoins and you're sitting in the living room, you're not aware what's going on. So that is the future. And if you want to be part of the future, that is the journey you need to take. So Ofgem, we provide these solutions, and mostly our focus has been on commercial industrial. We provide power to the industries. You know, industries are the core, and I agree with Andrew when he say 2.5 million people, 2.5 billion people. If these people don't have a solution, whether from power or heat, they're going to burn down everything and then to convert them into charcoal. You know, where will this charcoal come from? 2.5 billion people. So we need to transition. And yes, we provide these solutions together. I know the utility are not so happy about the work that we do because we tend to take a lot of their business. But the reality is, a utility like KPLC, Umeme, or Ketraco, or the Tanzanian TANESCO, they're all utility that are listed companies. Their mandate is to make money. So there will be no day that they're going to give you discounts, or there will be no day that they're going to feel sorry for you. So their mandate is to make money for the shareholders. And we're here to discount, to make sure that it is very competitive, because it's a monopoly and we want to provide the same solution. But please don't go and tell the KPLC I said that. Just keep it within us. Yes, so we're a Kenyan company. I'm one of the founders, and we founded the company 8 years ago. And we recently had a new shareholder, which is part of the Toyota Tusha Group, which is Sifao. And so we are Paris. We registered to Paris, but also Paris Sifao is also 100% owned by Toyota Tusha Group. So we are one of the few Kenyan companies that have done a milestone in the renewable energy. This is purely a foreign-dominated market, so we're fighting a lot with foreign competitors who have very cheap debt and cheap money. So ESAC is here, Amadi is here. The most important is we can need to discuss is how to also bring cheap money in the near future. I know it's the last hour, but because it's a renewable energy, I hope everybody has the energy to go. In the renewable energy space, we say the battery state of charge is very low at this point. So we'll try and figure out how to charge it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jibril. Let's appreciate Jibril and Andrew for the presentation. That was for Jibril. Now let's appreciate Andrew. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to do that because they're seated in the middle, and I'm just doing this ping pong thing here. So I mean, we moved from Andrew to Jibril, and Jibril just raised the bar higher by standing. And now we want, because my mind also works in 3D and loves pictures, I just want now to move to Dr. Linda Davis to tell us more about Giraffe. And I didn't mention she's called doctor. I wanted her to do that by herself, but she was quite modest. So that's why I'm going back to it. Let's welcome Dr. Linda Davis.
No, asante. So I will stand as well. So do we have my slides? I was asked to prepare slides, but my colleagues, I don't know what happened. Are we ready? Good. Okay, fantastic. So as I said in my introduction, we are a developer of rural bioeconomies, and we are very general and very specific at the same time because it's about livelihoods. It's really about putting money in the community's pockets. It's about equity, right? And our medium is producing ethanol cooking fuel. I have the pleasure of sitting with electricity people, and people mostly understand electricity very, very well. But I come at energy at the household levels. And at the household, you need electricity and you need heat, right? So you need to cook and you need lighting as well. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background. Forgive me if this is familiar to you, but I find that just painting a real picture of we don't talk much about clean cooking, and I have some theories why that is the case, right? It's more interesting to talk about gigawatts and it's also, about the grid. That is very, very approachable to some of the technical people, but when it comes to cooking, it's relegated, right? So next slide, please. I'm going to run very, very quickly on this. Okay, so that's my company, founder and CEO. So this is a picture of my auntie. I took this picture in 2003. And at this point, I didn't really understand the issue with this. And I'm pretty sure that most of us here are familiar with a picture like this, certainly the Kenyans, right? And I took a picture of it, and she had said, Linda, you can't handle the smoke. You need to be outside. You're the sous chef, hand me the onions and everything. And this is her. So, and this is my village, right? And most Kenyans would understand you have a city life, and then during Christmas or whatever, you go to the village. So that is that. We didn't have electricity, right? 100 years ago when I was growing up in high school, and I was in high school. But so I knew very clearly that once I get my first paycheck, I know that I have to bring electricity to my home. So I did do a grid connection way back when, around 2005, 2006. Didn't even think about the clean cooking aspect, didn't even think that that was a problem. Fast forward, 2015, I'm in the US, doing okay, and this issue was being solved in the United States in an industry that I was very familiar with, and that is ethanol cooking fuel. And that had been adopted for cooking. Needless to say, I very, very quickly came, and finally I had a solution for my auntie. Let me step back a little bit and give you the size of the problem. We've had the size of the problem for the electricity side. Let's take a look at the cooking side as well. Now, this picture I took 2 weeks ago when I was in Ghana really breaks my heart. Now, let's just sit a moment with that. This was taken about 11 o'clock in the morning. These girls and that young boy were not in school, right? So the lack of clean cooking fuel, the lack of efficient fuel has an impact in education, right? Women and children are mostly impacted. They spend 5-6 hours because of simple things such as cooking. Next slide, please. So this is, I took a picture, I went out on holiday because I'm the type of person that takes the family to any village, yeah? So this was down in Eldoret. And look, we spent a lot of time to put a simple meal at the table, just to reinforce the idea that if you're spending 5-6 hours on cooking, what else are you not doing? But let me just talk a little bit about the health aspect of the lack of clean cooking fuel. Bigger, more impactful than AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined, the number of women and children that die every single year from the lack of clean cooking fuel. Put another way, 25,000 Kenyans die every single year for the lack of clean cooking fuel, simply because they try to cook that has a detrimental effect on health. So the statistics are quite dire. Next slide, please. So this is a picture that I took coming out of my area of operation in Kilifi County. And honestly, standing outside of my farm, and I'll talk about this, in an hour, you'd have these borders just literally going out, taking out old growth forest, your forest, my forest, for cooking. 85% of Kenyans use charcoal, right? And there is no accessible alternative. So as you can imagine with climate change, which is very topical for this conference, this is a real problem. Next slide, please. Now, this is not fun, right? Many people romanticize this, right? Some statistics. The average load is about 52 kilograms, and the average woman walks about 7 kilometers a day, right? Carrying this. You can imagine the impacts on health, your back and bits and pieces like that. So I talk to a lot of my friends, and they're like, oh, no, that's how my grandmother likes to cook. No, she doesn't. There's just no other alternative. And we can challenge that. Oh, the food tastes better like this. But if we're killing grandmother by having her smoke 4 packets of cigarettes a day every time she cooks with firewood. I'll say that again. Cooking with firewood and charcoal is equivalent to smoking 4 packets of cigarettes a day for 1 hour, right? So that is very, very sobering. So it doesn't matter how much better the githeri tastes. I'm not going to kill grandmother for that. Again, there's just a lack of dignity, right, in cooking in this way, right? Everybody knows cooking was settled in the 1950s in the West. You cook in front of a multi-burner standing up. That's just how you do it. You flick your wrist, and heat comes up, fire comes up, and that's how you cook. And yet for the African woman in 2022, this is how the majority of us cooks. I'm going to very quickly move to the solution. Charcoal, no different, right? This is a real problem. It's very, very time consuming. Okay, so what is Giraffe Bioenergy doing? I said we are a developer of rural bioeconomies. So our solution is to involve smallholder farmers in marginal semi-arid areas where no food crops can grow. And we're producing a very hardy crop called cassava. Cassava, sadly, in Kenya is not a major food crop, so that is important for us to point out and to also develop industrial breeds that don't even taste good. So it's literally an industrial crop. Other countries, the US uses excess corn, Europe uses excess wheat, Thailand uses excess wheat, cassava, and rice and bits and pieces. So any starch material we can use to make ethanol. So Giraffe Bioenergy is developing 3,000 acres of industrial cassava. And then after that, so that's as an example of cassava. This is a picture I took in Nigeria. This will be hopefully our picture in next year when we are harvesting 60 metric tons of cassava on a daily basis to feed our biorefinery. Next slide, please. That's an example of a biorefinery as involved in the development of, and we will be producing on-spec ethanol cooking fuel. So if you think of the module of Giraffe Bioenergy, 3 modules. 1, the agricultural module, 2, the biorefinery module, and thirdly, the distribution module. Next slide. Which mercifully we don't have to develop. There's already people that know how to use move flammable liquids, right? So Shell, which is in Kenya, is a Vivo subsidiary, will be collecting ethanol cooking fuel from my biorefinery. Next slide. And then the downstream has already been developed. You may have heard of Cocoa Networks, who are making strides, right? 650,000 Kenyan households today are relying on ethanol as a primary cooking fuel. The travesty is this ethanol is imported. What that means is we're making other farmers rich. It's imported from the United States, right? And yet we have a community that we can bring into the formal economy by being a producer. In summary, the circularity of the solution that we're presenting at Giraffe Bioenergy is this. We will produce ethanol in the rural areas using cassava, primarily Kilifi County, where there's arid land, and this ethanol is distributed in the urban areas, right? So technically speaking, next slide, please, last slide, please. This is what we're trying to, this is the dignity we can bring for the urban community, right? Where we're not using charcoal, we're not using kerosene, right? And the burners have already been distributed, the burners are already in existence, the downstream marketing is already in existence. In summary, we are producing, last slide. Yeah, so for Kenyans, by Kenyans, right? So produced in the rural areas, consumed in the urban community. And the reason for that is simply the distribution, right? So you need to have your accessible, right? So remember, with cooking fuel to be viable, it has to be safe, clean, accessible, affordable, right? So this solution is for the urban areas, produced in the rural areas. We're partnering with my brother here, Andrew Tombolo, to look at alternative solutions for the rural areas. So we do not have giraffe bioenergy, and you have communities under the grid that are still using charcoal and firewood. We will have a solution that can be deployed in the rural areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Linda Davis, for the 3D presentation. I mean, they say one slide has 1,000 words, right? Because they say a picture is like. So yeah, so that was quite insightful to see what you're doing down there in Kilifi. I will now move to Juliana. You know, the first time I mean, we were interacting with her. We were speaking about the conference, and then I also told her that Giuliani will also be in the conference. It's because I was looking at the rhyme of Giuliani and Juliana. It's only that they didn't do a collab today on the renewable energy space. So allow me to introduce and invite Juliana to talk us more about what they're doing as NL.
Asante.
You can use a.
The podium is usually so much taller than I am. So maybe I can just stand here like Jibril did.
Okay.
So it's always, first of all, it's so inspiring to listen to Dr. Linda and Jibril, entrepreneurs and innovators who are just trying to make a difference in the energy space in Kenya. And sometimes because I am from the independent power producer side, kind of as known as the bad boys, but we aren't, we're all friends, because there has to be development on both sides for us to actually see any gains. So I have a presentation here, but I think the first couple of slides we've already gone through in the introduction. But yeah. So maybe I can just start by saying that I think, first of all, electricity is something that we all consume. The challenges around the cost of electricity, we face them every month, every week, whenever you buy your tokens. And the whole purpose of ESAC is to ensure that the electricity that you consume and everything that goes around it, the policies, the regulations, the players who are coming in, the investors who are coming in, they're doing it in a sustainable way so that we don't suffer the way we have over the last few years. The other thing is we're at a very peculiar time. There's a multiplicity of events that's occurring. One is the debt crisis that we're facing as a country. We have to be honest about that. Second is a high inflation rate. Third, unemployment, which has been a perennial problem in Kenya. And fourth, we're dealing with issues of climate adaptation. We need to ensure we are a bit more resilient. And these are huge systemic issues. And these are part of the things we're trying to solve. Yeah. Bringing together people like Jibril, also shameless plug, Dr. Linda, you can join us as well. I can send you the details. Andrew as well. And just bringing the minds together and trying to bring some discourse and engagement with public sector. Yeah. So like I mentioned, we were founded in 2019. We have around almost 800 megawatts that's tied to the grid. 1,000, utility scale, then 1,000 of that is kind of tied to the grid with a bit of off-grid and CNI. And then we have around 39 to 40 members, and that's growing as well. For a 3-year association, I think we've made some good strides, but we have a lot to do. So the next slide. So like I mentioned, we are here to transform the sector. We're here to transform the sector so we can serve the people of Kenya. We can ensure that the sector actually is part of the economic growth of the country. So part of the reason we actually formed the association is we wanted this sector to develop along the lines of excellence and transparency. And if there's any of you who's ever worked in electricity and energy, you know the bureaucracy around the processes, how to actually get your project through, how to get approval. So we want to ensure that there's some sort of transparency there. Integrity, I do not need to say anything more when it comes to integrity. Sustainability, and also we're about community. We're about bringing people together and thinking big and playing big. Next slide. So I mentioned before, within our membership, we focus on 4 key areas, and that's across the entire value chain of the electricity space. Generation, you know them, independent power producers, and also off-grid, mini-grids, and commercial and industrial players. These are the guys who actually produce the power, whether it's selling it to KPLC, selling it to industry, or actually even you yourself using your own power. Then we have transmission and distribution. Now, this is a space that is sort of lagging behind. And it's part of the reason that you get blackouts, your appliances are messed up when maybe there's power fluctuation, because we have a huge problem of aging infrastructure and a grid that is not stable. So we're trying to build some capacity in this part of the value chain to ensure that investments come in, and private investments. One thing I have to mention is, given the situation of where we're at as a country when it comes to debt, we want the public funds to deal with the priority areas. So whether it's healthcare and education, that's well and good. But for us to actually build out the energy space and the electricity sector, we need some private investment to step in. And when that happens, then you'll see a lot more growth and a lot more improvement. So I'll talk a bit about later on some of our plans. We've just launched our 6 pillars leading up to COP27. So I'll talk a bit about that on the transmission side. Then we have the commercial and industrial guys. I was just reading, I don't know if you've heard of the energy white paper, the infamous energy white paper, that states that there's around 150 megawatts of opportunity that's being taken up by diesel generators. And that, I don't think we haven't done like a very detailed study on that. You know, Jibril's team and the CNI working group are actually working on a baseline study, because if you're an industry that's connected to KPLC, that's connected to a diesel generator, that's also looking at solar, no wonder we are paying, how much is it for milk? Green hydrogen is all the talk. We can also argue about that if that's actually realistic, but this is how innovation starts, right? And we are well positioned for it. And there are also other aspects around power to X, clean cooking as well, electrifying clean cooking as well. Those are also aspects that we'll be looking at. So we launch that next month, December. So those are our members. We have global and local players. We have IPPs, we have law firms, we have consultants, we have financiers. We basically have anyone who's playing in the space as private sector. And these are, I think with this type of group around, then I think the future looks good. Yeah. So the next slide. We also work with our partners, KEPSA, hence my presence here. I'm actually replacing our chair, who's also the chair of KEPSA Energy Sector Board, George Aluru. He also wears many hats. Then we have another partner that's REST for Africa, Renewable Energy Solutions for Africa. So we work with them when it comes to training and looking at policy and regulatory gaps in Kenya. And lastly, we have Global Wind Energy Council, and their mandate is to promote wind energy within, it's global, but they also have an Africa office that's based here in Nairobi. So we work very closely with them over the years. So the next slide. So I'm sure you guys have heard that the president has mentioned a target of 100% renewable energy by 2030 as Kenya. Clean energy from renewable. So what will it take to get there? At least I'll speak from the ESAC side. And big generation, because Jibril can cover the CNI space. And there are a couple of things. So this is all ahead of COP27. So it's very strategic that the statements have come out yet again. Yeah, but we have to be honest and realistic and say, so what will we actually need to get there? The other thing we have to consider is it's an African COP, and most African countries are dealing with the same economic issues currently, whether it's because the lagging effects of COVID or whatever else is going on in the country. And the argument there will be, we have fossil fuels, why don't you let us use this to industrialize? And why don't you let us use this to grow our economy? I mean, very valid points, yeah, because the global north has done it for 100 years and more. So the argument for renewables needs to change, yeah? It's okay, you can go to that slide. It needs to change. So how do we counter the industrialization aspect when we're countering fossil fuel industrialization? So the current situation in Kenya is we have a 90% renewable energy grid, dispatchable, not installed base, installed capacity. As mentioned, almost 800 megawatts utility scale by ESAC. We are top 10 in geothermal generation, and we have more than 75% electricity access rate. I think it's almost 80, over 80, yeah. Electricity access rate, though that access rate, the definition also includes reliability. So you also have to be, we have to be careful there. So, and apologies, this slide is actually a bit small. So if we're going to get to 100%, and you've seen there, we're already sort of at 90, so it's not too far to go. But what does it mean with all the resources that we have? How do we take care of the jobs? How do we take care of the debt crisis? How do we take care of this high inflation? So how can renewable energy speak to economic growth? One, we need to look at demand. So selling and positioning Kenya as an investment destination for industries that are looking to green their operations, yeah? So currently what's happening in the global north is an energy crisis. A lot of companies are struggling because of the price of the inputs of electricity. And there's a lot of pressure for corporations to get to their net zero goals very quickly. So why not come to a place that has 90% renewable energy, yeah? What else needs to happen? Well, that's a better view. What else needs to happen? The grid infrastructure needs a lot of enhancement. It's aging. It also needs particularly private investment to come in. The second thing is investor risk. We need to ensure that we are really not countering anything that we've done over the last years that has attracted investment. So we need to ensure that we are attracting and not deterring investments by the messaging that's being put out there. Because any risk in one particular sector, I can speak to the generation side, where discussions around we entering into agreements actually increase the risk premium and increase the risk of the country. So investor confidence was a bit shaken there. So that needs to happen. When it comes to policies and regulations, we've already spoken about that. Enhancement, or rather ensuring that we have enabling policies and regulations. We've done a good job on the generation side. We've sort of outgrown the policy that was there. We now need to move into ensuring that if we are procuring capacity, then it has to be competitively procured. We are not going to do feed-in tariffs. It needs to be competitively procured because that's the only way you'll be able to get the price that is actually out there in the market. And the other thing is to ensure that there's proper planning. And I think it's great that there's the integrated national energy planning that's been set up within ministry. There's also counties that's been put in place. And that's actually speaking to a lot of the CNI off-grid and clean cooking aspects. So that integrated planning will actually help optimize these things. Then with financing, I don't see any reason why I can't be investing in these projects as a Kenyan through a certain pool of funds that maybe a pension fund is looking at or institutional investor is looking at. So trying to figure out some more sustainable, innovative ways to finance these projects is very key. Then also to speak to the unemployment issue. If we're looking to get to 100%, and this thing will happen fairly quickly, we need to start looking at, and if we're also speaking about growing demand in the future, we need to ensure that jobs are being taken into account, that elevation from poverty is being taken into account, that gender gaps are actually being taken into account. And that's the only way this thing will make sense for everyone, from me who's here at ESAC to Dr. Linda's auntie as well. It needs to be equitable. at the end of the day. So these are the 6-pillar blueprint that we're launching actually today on our social medias. If you go there, shameless plug, ESAC, ahead of COP27. And we'll be pushing these messages because they're very critical across the board, whether you're a huge generator or you're a small mini-grid or off-grid operator, or even a clean cooking innovator and entrepreneur. I think all these aspects are very critical to ensure that there's growth in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. At least now you know about the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya and what they do, and bringing different players together. And she generally said that they're already partnering, and Ofgen is a member, and she was inviting Dr. Linda and Andrew there to join as well. So last but not least, since you had Andrew Amadi kickstart, so we also finish off with Andrew. Andrew,
Yeah,
you're
thanks.
welcome.
Talk about a curveball. The last session and the last session and the last speaker of the day. So I've got 36 slides. Sorry, if can you load my slides? They're all text. You know, I want to get philosophical for a moment. So I'm an African, and I'm an entrepreneur, businessman in Africa. We really, ladies and gentlemen, have a great opportunity now, because how are we going to pay for all of this? Where's the money going to come from? And who's going to pay? So I think about this a lot. And what I realize is that what's so exciting about being in business now is that all the rules have changed. All the rules have changed. So I don't know how many of you just follow crypto, for example, or follow what's happening with companies like Facebook. I don't know how many of you saw that movie, but you know that these companies in Silicon Valley have raised billions of dollars, and they don't make revenue, $1 of revenue for the first 10 years. Because what do people want? It's not about dollars anymore. Not only about dollars, it's about carbon offsets. It's about cryptocurrencies, and it's about data. And in Africa, as a continent, we have a huge untapped potential of those three things. And that's what's going to pay for it if we play the game right. So I always think, you know, I love to go into the villages and sit with the chief and sit with the mamas and get dirty. You know, I mean, I put this on out of respect for you guys, but normally I'm sweating in a shirt and a pair of shorts. But what's interesting is that when you see what those villages are, what they aspire for, those people living in remote areas, they want what you've got, and they want what I've got. They want a HD TV. They want fast internet, and they want a stove that looks like your stove at home, and they want to switch the light on and off, and they want to be safe. We can do that. We can do that. We can provide it to those people, and we can do it right here in Africa by innovating. I always compare it to what happened in, I used to work in America, and I remember, when you walked around a city in America, every single street you walked down, there were call boxes. I don't know how many of you are old enough to know what a call box looked like. There were just banks of telephones everywhere because you had to phone with a copper wire. And then Africa completely transformed that by coming in with the GSM marketplace and became world leaders in GSM. And I think we have the opportunity to do the same in renewable energy. So what we're trying to do, as an example in Zambia, charcoal is so cheap. The technology I put into the homes costs me about $500 or $600 to make. So how do I make money out of that? Those people can't afford that. But what I'm doing is every time a mama switches on the stove to cook with our system, because it's connected to the internet, I can trade that carbon straight to BP in London as a carbon offset by reporting it into the cloud. I looked all over the world to find something that did this, and we couldn't find it. So this is a 2-plate gasifier stove on the top, and underneath it's a smart IoT connectivity, which gives the household lights, an HD TV, media streaming, a Wi-Fi hotspot, as well as charging. So That can be made in Kenya, it can be made in Zambia, it can be made anywhere. It's open source. So the way that I pay for it is because I sell those three things to the people who need it in the Northern Hemisphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I mean, just taking us through the innovation that you have. Let me begin it from there. I'll just have quick questions as we wrap up. I mean, you're doing two things right there, trying to increase access to energy at the same time, access to internet. So what's the nexus between these two sectors?
So,
and what trajectory are you seeing in
okay.
Africa?
So the interesting thing is I've got a friend of mine, he's a Xhosa man from South Africa, and he went to do some work in the UK, and he came back and he said, it's funny when you go to Europe because they think that because we're poor, we're also stupid. and there are a lot of very bright people here, and a lot of research, if you look up, will show that if you give any group of people access to energy and access to connectivity, you don't have to teach them anything because they will thrive and they'll lift themselves out of poverty. And so my belief is that if you give people those two things, they can just think about what a farmer can do if he has an e-commerce engine. Just think about, okay, here's another question for audience. What's the average age of the population, the mean age of the population in Europe? Any ideas? The middle age. The average age of all the countries in Europe, what's the mean age? 47. Okay, we're a continent of 1.2 billion people at the moment. What's the mean age in Africa? 18. That means that half of the people out there are under the age of 18. Can you imagine have you ever seen, so I take when I'm struggling with my phone, I take it to my son. He can sort out anything on my phone in 30 seconds. He says, "Oh, Dad, how come you still do, boom, 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 it's done." If you give those kids under the age of 18 access to the internet, fast internet, can you imagine how it'll transform this continent? That's the connection.
Thanks, Andrew. And let me now bring in Jibril. So looking at the level of investment that is required to increase access to energy. I mean, you spoke about a partnership that you brought in to Ofgem. And I guess that is because you required substantive injection of capital. So what are the mechanisms that you think startups should be able to adopt in Kenya so as to upscale some of the resource, some of the technology they have? Because he generally said, we are smart, right?
Just what I heard.
Yeah, I'm just picking up from where you left, and how I mean, picking up from the lessons of Ofgem.
Yeah, so I think maybe just before I answer that, I remember he said about switching the lights on and off. I realized very recently that I had a problem at home because I was accused of every time you come to this house, you're switching lights off. I go around switching all the lights off because I'm thinking from a savings perspective. And and of course, and every morning I look outside the window to see whether the sun is out there because we sell electricity from solar. So I've, from a weatherman to someone who's very conscious about it. But of course, as a company, we are more geared towards profit, of course, but also we look at the planet and the people. In terms of financing, one of the areas that most crucial, I would say, if you look at the investments in totality globally, I think it's about 1% that has reached Africa of the entire investments that has been done in the renewable energy space. It's only up to not more than a 1% that has reached Africa. So that means we can't accelerate investments without money. And the people who have the money are predominantly European companies, and they always would fund European, funders would fund European company registered locally. So as local entity, what we've done is in our previous business, we've used our own money and we've raised funds internally between the shareholders, and eventually we got new funders to come in. But of course, look, the business is so much. Kenya at the moment, there's about 500 megawatts on the CNI that is available for us. That's like $500 million, close to, on the CNI alone. Where would we get this money from? Nobody's willing to invest, especially there's a risk to the people that we invest in. Most African companies are not bankable. So there's two sides to the problem. One, African companies are not bankable. Number two, the person giving money is giving money only to the people they trust. So we want to change the narrative and say that mixed players to be allowed and to be very competitive. I mean, I can't compete with the local conventional bank giving me at 8% debt, and someone comes in from Netherlands with 2% or 3% to the euro. It's we can't compete that way. So I think there are other means. Maybe as I mentioned, ESHAC and Andrew here also to assist in the near future is to try and invite as many funders to come in, and not only funders, but also to have development banks to try to de-risk. So I'll give you an example. I'm doing a project in South Sudan, in Juba. And if I go to anybody and say, I have a client in South Sudan, boss, who's going to fund you? Nobody, So I'll have to take money from my own pocket and make sure that the project is done. How much is it? It's $1.2 million. Wow. You don't get that kind of money anywhere. So we want development organizations, banks, to come and de-risk essentially those clients to make them bankable. Yeah, so about money, it's quite a lot, but yeah, maybe the associations are always there to support and make sure that there's a lot of grant. Well, one more thing that we are trying to work with now is called joint carbon credit mechanism. Basically, if you apply, you get a rebate of the investments that you've done. So let's say you've installed solar power in a factory and it's costed you $500,000. You apply and then you get about $200,000 paid back. It takes a bit of time, 6 months to 1 year, but you get it back. It's called joint carbon credit mechanism, and it's from the Japanese government. So we rely on such kind of models to get some of our money back. It's a grant, yes. And if you're interested, we can speak on the site. And then you can give me my commission. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Jibril, for giving us some insights to your business. So Andrew, I mean, so we talked about the nexus between technology, access to the internet, and renewable energy. So we want to take a look between renewable energy and climate change. The other day, I had you talk about how we can use energy to then support communities in the drought-stricken areas. So tell us more. What do you think? I mean, as a country, we could benefit from renewable energy in trying to address droughts within the short-term and mid-term measure.
Thank you so much. And I think I have this thing where I can connect anything to renewable energy. So even the data, the finance, and the climate, and the situation that we're facing. So I'll try and do that in 1 or 2 minutes. So we have a climate effect that we knew about. So this famine is not a surprise. We knew that it was coming. It's been projected. I looked at the data from 8 years ago, and it's spot on, and it's going to get worse. So for me, I have committed my entire being to the interface between the challenge and the opportunity. And there's a lot that can happen there. So the first opportunity that we have in this problem is that with more drought, there's more sun. With more sun, Jibril gets very happy. He looks up, sees the sun, and he sees money in the bank. So we can have that extended. If you were to quantify the potential for solar for Africa, if it were to be monetized, it would be worth many times over the value of oil, coal, and all the other minerals that we have. So even as we go to COP27 and say we have fossil fuels, we have more renewable energy than anywhere else in the world. So that's why we should be looking at it. Now we have to make this work for us. What doesn't work for us is these big centralized systems. They haven't worked because of what economists call the principal agent dilemma, that the agent that is supposed to act on behalf of the principal, which is Dr. Linda's aunt, are not doing it. So what's the answer to this problem? It's a decentralized system. That's where your crypto comes in. It's a proof of concept that you can be able, on a massive scale, to create collaboration. So I see the future in terms of the response to climate is not about unhealthy competition. There's healthy competition. The competition is who can make the most efficient panel, who can be able to deliver water at the lowest cost, who can be able to take these productive opportunities to the most distant place. And that is what we are looking at now. We can deploy renewable energy with technology, monetize, and bring those people in the margins into the formal economy. So we can take solar water pumps, we can find the water that's available. Is it surface water? Is it under the surface? Is it deep down? But we can get it somehow. We can put that water to productive use and produce cassava, and we can link the cassava production to the value chain that is already existing and take those people permanently out of poverty. So that is the approach that we're looking at. So we've just crystallized the thinking and said, as a sector, we don't have the money to be able to deploy and to fund feeding programs that don't work. But we have the tools, so to speak, teach people how to fish rather than taking the fish to them. We can teach them through information. If somebody could win a gold medal by watching a YouTube video, what production can they be able to do by having internet access, having the energy to be able to do it, and having the technology to be able to provide the conversion? And all of this is decentralized. And how do you create stability in a decentralized system? And that just becomes democratization. What do people want? And you're very right, the people in those villages, they want the very same things that we want. They need food security. How do we have food security? Refrigeration. Why are we taxing refrigeration at 35%? Yet there's now the technology to deploy solar-powered freezers to every village. How much of food security will be achieved? How many animals will not have to be killed and slaughtered and destroyed because they're going to die? Because you can now manage the shelf life of food. So there's a lot that renewable energy can do. It can be deployed faster than the grid. It can be deployed at the speed of an electric motorcycle. And I see that as the future. And I think the future is bright and it's unlimited. And the youth that are in this is where we design from. I think backwards from 40 years from now, 2.5 billion people. How many calories of food will we need to be able to produce? How much land do we need to be able to produce this food? And the answer is 25% of Africa's landmass can feed the entire planet. I may be wrong. You can check it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I mean, I feel proud to be called Amadi after your. Anyway, just on a light note. I mean, we are out of time, but allow me just to ask a quick question to Dr. Linda. When people talk about renewable energy, the first thing that comes to mind is solar. It's almost like when we're talking about gender. When you talk about gender, it's synonymous for women. So, do you face this challenge as you advance your technology?
No, absolutely. You know, I'm always the mama kupika cooking, right? So we have to think again. I said this at the top of my remarks. We have to think about it at the household level, light and heat, right? But let me just drive one point in. I gave you quite a few statistics around the health impact. Deforestation is a leading driver, deforestation, etc. But let me drive this just to underscore my colleagues here. From a climate change perspective, cooking with biomass, charcoal and firewood, is the second driver of greenhouses, second producer, emitter of greenhouse gases in Kenya. Second only to your matatus belching the black smoke, right? The transport industry. The second, 40%. So solving cooking through either electrification, ethanol, whatever it is, we will be 40% closer to our NDCs. You referenced COP27 coming up, right? And you're also having the socio-economic impacts that we talked about, right? And we have all those follow-on ripple effects. So in my mind, when we think about energy, hopefully when we leave this room, let's think about it not as decoupled, light only, right? Let's think about that coupled. How do we cook and how do we light our homes?
Thank you so much. I think looking at the time, we'll end it at that.
We have a productive use of renewable energy biogas sub-working group that is developing that. We couldn't go into all the details, but there is a lot that is happening in that area. Yeah, and that is the perfect example of circular economy. I have a biogas system at home and I sell biogas bioslurry at only 50 shillings a liter.
Yeah, so I mean, it basically just shows that when people hear about renewable energy, there are three things that they quickly think about and not the other elements that are a source of clean energy. I think allow me to end the session there and appreciate Dr. Linda, Andrew Amadi, Jibril Omar, Juliana, and Andrew. Thank you so much. Let's appreciate the panelists. We appreciate them for taking the time to be with us.